I'm curious if you have ever felt unheard in a business meeting. Have you ever felt silenced in a business meeting? Have you ever felt like, man, I just said that? And when John or Karen said it, it was like, wow, this is the best thing ever. Have you ever doubted yourself and wondered if maybe it was the way you articulated it? Maybe you didn't wear a smile, and maybe that's why your voice was silenced. Have you ever felt like you had to cover in the workplace? And what I mean by covering is maybe you changed your dialect. Maybe you changed the cadence of the way you speak. Maybe you swapped out words, you used different words so that you can cover. And guess what happened? It started to dilute your authentic self. And you did that because you wanted to make sure that you assimilated to the dominant culture of the workplace. Have you ever wanted to wear braids to a big business meeting and decided to go ahead and put on that blonde straight wig? I'm sure that none of you are listening to this can really relate. And we know that that is the reality of how we have to show up, how we have to dilute ourselves and die down and really try to remove as much of our identity as possible in order to hopefully be respected and appreciated in the workplace. Have you ever just felt unwelcomed at work? Have you ever just felt like, you know what, I'm only good or I'm only welcome when I just shut my mouth and be quiet and wear a smile? You got to remember, you got to make sure you wear that smile. I'm sure all of you have had experiences like this. And these experiences are packed with so many different challenges, from microaggressions, from feeling marginalized, from unintentionally or intentionally recognizing that you're dealing with different biases in the workplace. It also stems from the lack of psychological safety. It also stems from us trying to get away from stereotypes on what it's like to be an African American woman in the workplace. And we will talk about all of those different components. For the purpose of our time today, though, we're going to talk more about how you've been silenced, which is also how you've been marginalized. I want to share my experience. So about 18 years ago, I started working for this Fortune 100 company, really leading the charge in the technology space. And I must say, I loved it. I enjoyed it so much. As a matter of fact, I owe a lot of my knowledge, expertise, and experience, and a lot of the skills I was able to hone in on and develop, I owe them to that organization. I recognized over the years, though, that I was always the facilitator. People typically told me they loved it when I spoke. And so, guess what? That's all I did was speak. And as a matter of fact, I was put in this box to Ebony only speaks. About 5 years ago, I was given the opportunity. They came to me and said, Ebony, we want to teach all of the C-suite. So the CEO, CFO, CIO, CTO, we want to teach them about unconscious biases and how they play out in the workplace. And so out of all of the facilitators, they came to me. I mean, can you imagine a person that looks like me, smiles like me, wears their hair like me, standing in front of people that don't look like me, don't smile like me, a different socioeconomic status, different probably education? Can you imagine they chose me to come and share this challenging news to an audience that needed it the most? They chose me. At the time, I was excited, and I really still appreciate that experience because it allowed me to start building connections with those individuals. And so it definitely was some value add to it. And then I quickly recognized that as long as I was dancing to the beat of that drum, I was appreciated. I had a fan base. And as soon as I started to leverage my voice in a different way that wasn't going to the exact beat of their drum, I was outcast. I was not valued as much. I was not asked to use my strategic mind to actually be in rooms and spaces where we start to develop and create. I wasn't able to do that. The only space that I was in, that box, was I could facilitate and teach a strong message to the team that needs it most. Yet I was not the one they chose when it was time to talk about how do we create, innovate. So it did not allow me to use my strategic mind as much. And I was challenged with that. I'm certain that as I told that story, you all have a similar one. And let's go ahead now and dive into it. So for the remaining of this video, we're going to talk about some ways to get around that when you feel like you've been silenced, you've been put in a box, you've been marginalized in the workplace. What are some things that we can do as women of color and women in the workplace? And then we're going to end talking about what are some things that our allies can do to really be able to be more supportive of marginalized groups, particularly women, Black women in corporate spaces. The first thing I encourage for us that feel marginalized, feel silenced, feel unheard, is to really start to build strategic partnerships and relationships. And we have to do that early on. And I understand that that could be challenging. And also, it's going to shift us and it's going to prompt us to get out of our comfort zone, yet it must be done. It will help us to not feel alone and isolated. It will allow other people, top, bottom, to be able to see, hear, and understand our thought process and our mindsets. And our influence will start to permeate outside of this team that we're on. It's going to actually start to elevate to people in higher roles and positions than us. And so I highly encourage us to strategically think about, how am I going to build relationships from the top down? So if for some reason I get stuck right here, I feel isolated right here, I have someone who has shown me they will be an ally to me that'll help me to navigate those spaces in that water so that our voice can start to be heard. That's the first thing. We have to get out of our comfort zone. We have to start building effective workplace relationships. The next thing is to leverage our voice and just speak up. And I will share with you that that takes a lot of courageousness. It really does. You don't know how many days and nights I would sit and think, couldn't sleep, because I'm thinking, how am I going to avoid coming across as the angry Black woman? How am I going to make sure that what I say and what I've been trying to say is actually being heard, and not just heard with the outer ear, heard with the inner ear, and heard with the heart? How am I going to do that? You have to speak up eventually. I know that you're wondering if you'll be heard. I know you're wondering if there will be negative consequences. And eventually you have to take hold of your career and your passion and your life. And so you have to speak up, you have to share. And that is why starting to develop those relationships and recognizing who can be an ally to you early on is going to be extremely important, because you might need to go back to them and gain some coaching, insight, and feedback from them so that you can speak up. When it comes to speaking up, and I'll unpack this more in a future video, and there are a couple of things I encourage you to do, is to truly stay away from words of uncertainty and stay away from words that convey or exude a lot of emotion and feeling. I highly encourage you to plan this out. I highly encourage you to stay away from emotions and feelings. I highly encourage you to research and understand what you want to say and how you can say it in the way that's going to perk the ear of the person you're giving the information to. And so if you're speaking to your leader, you should talk about the topic and also express the value add of them adhering to your recommendation and the impact that's going to have on you, your performance, the impact it's going to have on your team, their team, and the organization. So I encourage you to plan your message accordingly. And that'll also help you to stay away from the emotional side of things. Now, what are some tips that we can give for allies? People who want to stand up and help to clear the path for marginalized groups. I encourage my allies to learn more about the Black experience in the workplace. And I'm not saying for us to for you to walk up to every Black woman or Black man or Asian woman or a Latina and ask them about their experience. That is not what I'm asking us to do because we are not to be interviewed. What I am asking for allies to do is to start doing your own independent research, YouTube videos. Pay attention to things that you learn and concepts you learn, like covering, concepts you learn, like stereotypes, concepts you learn about marginalization, concepts you learn about, microaggressions. Learn those and then see it, be intentional about seeing it come to life in the workplace. Because you can learn this concept until you see it come to life in your environment, it's not going to really permeate and make much sense to you. It's not going to resonate with you as much. And so I highly encourage you to do your own self-discovery and self-learning and now watch and see how these things come to life for you. Step outside of you. And this is where exuding empathy comes into play. And when I say step outside of you, even when it comes down to coaching and giving feedback to someone you're being an ally to or a group you're being an ally to, give them feedback based on them being an African American woman, them being an Asian woman. Try not to give them feedback that you would do as a white male. Recognize and leverage your privilege. I believe that privilege has taken on this bad connotation, and I must say that we're all privileged to a certain degree for a certain situation. And so I highly encourage you all to lean into your privilege when it comes to opening or giving access for marginalized groups. You have to be able to own your privilege. You have to know your privilege. You have to be okay with understanding that you have certain resources and advantages and partnerships that others just don't have. And those resources, partnerships that others just don't have will be what will help others that don't have those resources, those partnerships, and those advantages. And so be okay with that. I'll just give you another example because I know this whole thing of privilege is a lot, and we'll talk about that in another episode. If I think about, because I do not identify as LGBTQIA+, I actually I identify as a straight woman, I might or I will have a certain privilege in spaces where maybe people who identify as LGBTQIA+ don't. That's my privilege. And I'm an African American woman. And so again, we all are privileged about a certain thing to a certain degree. Be open to honest and brutal feedback and don't take it personally. I hope today you were able to walk away with at least 2 golden nuggets on something that you can do in order to navigate the space that you're in if you are identify as a marginalized group. And I also hope that you as an ally just listening to this video were able to walk away with some key insights and practical steps on some things you can do to really be able to leverage your privilege and create a more equitable and inclusive workplace environment for all. Thank you so much for tuning into this video, and I look forward to seeing you on the next one. Have a great day. Goodbye.